chapter 50. We'll finish up the book of Genesis tonight, Lord willing. Next Wednesday, move on to the book of Daniel. So that's quite a shift from Genesis chapter 50 to Daniel 1. But that's going to be the plan if you want to go ahead and start thinking about or studying ahead. I feel like at least the last 2 or 3 studies that we've talked about have really revolved around death. I'm kind of running out of questions here concerning the body and death, but I think we talked just a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago. Kind of discussed as to whether anybody had any preference, what they wanted done whenever they depart from this life. But tonight we're going to study, of course, about the death of Jacob and Joseph and talk about some of the lessons that we can learn from that. And then there's some interaction in this chapter, too, that takes place between Joseph and his brothers. I think there's a lot of good lessons that could be brought out of that. We'll see how much time we have left whenever we get to that point, though. Question number 1, though, on your handout, again, revolves around the idea of death in our body. But what do you want to happen to your body when you die? Is anybody, who doesn't care? Anybody in there? Okay. I just see men raising their hands. All right. Does anybody have plans to be buried? Embalmed, buried? Yes. Yes. Cremated? Oh, okay. Couple? Okay. So, one of the interesting things that we read about tonight, I was kind of thinking about this. As far as I know, Jacob and Joseph in the Old Testament are the only Israelites whose bodies were ever embalmed. It could be, well, I guess maybe you should say that we read about in the Bible. I don't know if the Israelites were while they were in Egypt, because it wasn't always reserved for just anybody and everybody. In fact, had to be a pretty famous person, or you had to have a lot of money in order to get embalmed. And part of that was because of the beliefs system that the Egyptians had in the afterlife. We'll talk a little bit about that, hopefully, whenever we get to there. But go ahead.
Well, the embalming, I would think, would be kind of expensive.
Yeah.
Because it didn't take like 70 days.
Yeah.
And I
think was it 40? Yes, 40. And then there was a 70-day, yeah. But a long time.
But, yeah, and then I don't know if they just sit them back and let them alone, or if they did stuff all the time.
Right.
Anyway, it would be probably expensive to do.
Yeah. Well, if you go back and you read the Egyptian culture, it involved removing the internal organs and, some other stuff. So I imagine it would have been a pretty lengthy process to have gone through. But you look in the tombs of the Egyptians today, the mummies, and they did a pretty good job of it. And they had a pretty good system that they had in place. But, you think about death. Of course, death is something that all of us are going to go through. I remember the story of one preacher. He asked his friend what the death rate was in his city. And he said, 1 apiece. And that's true everywhere, isn't it? You think about the idea of death. It isn't an accident. The Bible tells us it's an appointment. And nobody has figured out how to cancel that appointment or erase that date. This chapter records 2 deaths in what I would say referred to as 3 burials. 2 of them are literal burials, that of Jacob and Joseph. And then there's an issue that comes up from the past that's finally buried, I think, and put to rest too. Let's talk a little bit here about chapter 50 and what we learned from it.
Before you move on,
yeah.
It's kind of a side note, but I think there's a considerable number of people who believe it's unscriptural to be cremated.
Yeah.
I can't read anything in the Bible about that.
No, there's no law or command concerning your body, and a lot of it has to do with culture and custom of the day. I mean, whatever I think was the culture or the custom, that's what people did with the body. And yeah, like you said, some people believe that it's a sin to destroy your body, but I mean, what happens to it when you put it in the ground? It goes right back to particles, doesn't it? So it's just a matter of time. I mean, I always say it's not going to be any harder for God to resurrect us from the dead. He did it when Lazarus was dead for 3 days. Jesus laid in the tomb for 3 days. Didn't have any problem with those not going to have any problem with us either. But yeah, there's just there's no command, no law of God as to what is to be done with the body after we depart from this life. So question number 2 here, what does Joseph do whenever his father dies? How does he react? Yeah, one of the things we read about with Jacob's death, Jacob died with all of his sons standing around him. You know, if you got to choose how you get to go out of this life, I would think that all of us would probably choose to be surrounded by our family. But even if we aren't surrounded by our family, our God is waiting for us in the shadows. And so that's the good thing that we always need to think about. But you think about losing somebody you love, the person who loved that person the most is going to feel the most sense of loss, aren't they? I think how much loss you feel is related to number one, the amount of time you spend with a person. I think the more amount of time you spend with a person, the longer or the stronger the attachment that you have to them. And a lot of times these are people who we've spent our entire lives with, you know, who we've known from the time that we were born. And so we're going to be the ones, children, I think, are going to be the ones who feel the loss the most. Joseph had a deep compassion, though, for his father, didn't he? And so Joseph was obviously touched. He was emotional whenever his father departed from this life. And, you know, the Bible teaches us that death is our enemy. Now, I know that, you know, there is a sense in which the Christian is better off after they die, but yet in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, what's the last enemy that's going to be destroyed? It's death. That's our enemy. And when you think about it being our enemy, it's because it robs us of somebody who is so dear to us. And when that happens, of course, we feel the sting of that, don't we? That's the sting of death. All of us have felt it in this life. We'll probably feel it many times more. But Joseph felt, and this is the 6th time, as you read the account of Joseph, this is the 6th time in the Bible that you read about him weeping. One of the things about, you go back through the history of these Semitic people, they're pretty emotional people, aren't they? Not uncommon to read about them. They're showing their emotions openly. And do you think God expects us to weep whenever we lose somebody who's close to us? Well, yeah, I would say. I mean, he doesn't want us to weep hopelessly, does he? But there is a sting that comes along with death. And Joseph was just a human being. He felt that sting when he lost his father. And of course, he openly expressed that emotion by weeping. Question number 3, this is kind of an interesting idea. I don't know if you've had time to think about it or maybe look into it a little bit more. But if you had to assign a theme to this chapter, what theme would you assign to it? And really, to me, I think it's kind of the whole theme of the entire book of Genesis. If you think about the entire book of Genesis and you say, you know, what is this book all about? What would you say?
Maybe preparations.
Well, that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of it that takes place. This isn't a right or wrong answer. It's more of a, you know, when you look at it, how do you view the book overall?
I would say preserving the seed of Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, you know, again, and this is, I mean, you could probably say this about every book in the Bible. I look through the book of Genesis, and one of the things that really stands out to me through all these things that are going on in the world, and this is something that Danny says a lot. You know, he might think we don't listen to him because he says it a lot, but my great takeaway from the book of Genesis is God is in control. And you know, you look back through Adam and Eve. I mean, he was in control when he made the earth. When they sinned, he had it all under control, didn't he? You read about, you know, you get to the point of Noah and the flood. Well, the world is just tremendously wicked. God's got it. Don't worry about it. He took care of it, right? All through these things. And you look at the life of Joseph, it's another one of those things, ups and downs. You know, but God's there. And I think a lot of times things happen in our lives and we we think, well, where is God and what is his plan? And, does he understand what's going on, or does he really have things under control? And by the time you read through the entire Bible and you get to the end, did he have everything under control? Yeah. I mean, there were some difficult spots that people found themselves in, but ultimately God was there. And so when you read about through that book of Genesis, just kind of think about it from a perspective, just kind of standing on the sidelines and watch God doing what he wants done in this world. That's the way God has operated from the beginning of time. And so he's masterfully working out this plan. You think about, sometimes we look at the world and we say, well, the world's in chaos. And it is. I mean, there's times you look at it, like during Noah's day, it was chaotic, wasn't it? Sin brought the chaos, but God is trying to establish order through this redemptive plan that he has and get everything back to where it's supposed to be. And so you see God working through the book of Genesis. But like I said to me, that you could really say that about any book of the Bible. But it's a great theme of the Bible, and one I think that we need to keep in mind, especially in very difficult times. God's in control of the world. You look back through history, he's been in control. He's in control of nations, generations, each and every life. God's in control whether a person chooses to do good or bad, right?
Well, I always think that Isaiah 46:10, where it's saying he's declaring the end from the beginning and information, times, things not yet done. He's not surprised that anything happens.
No.
It's going to happen. He's letting it go for his purpose, as he said.
Yeah.
We still have free choice, but he knows what we're going to do. And obviously, by this David, that's kind of the center of his wisdom right there.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes him God, like you said, right? That's why we're not God, because we don't know and we can't control events and get them to come out the way that we want. But God can. And you think about, again, all those times looking back through the history of man where, man's fretting or individuals are fretting about what's going on, and God's just kind of casually sitting back saying, just wait a minute, I've got everything under control. Joseph's life's a tremendous example of that. But when you look at those things and you ask this question, what should our response be to all that? I think it should be this idea, or maybe the question of, how can I help? What do you want me to do? And you look at the great servants of God, that was their attitude, wasn't it? They trusted in God. They say, what do you want me to do? How can I help? And that's the story of the Christ coming into this world. So it's a relevant theme in this chapter. It's really a relevant theme, I think, throughout the entire book of Genesis. Question number 4 here. What does Joseph ask Pharaoh?
If he can take his father and bury him in Canaan.
Yeah, as important as Joseph was, and we've read and studied before how he was second in command of Egypt, he still had to secure royal permission from Pharaoh to leave the land. Why do you think that is?
Well, because Pharaoh's still in charge.
Yeah, he's serving under Pharaoh, right? And you think about this point, I mean, the famine's long over at this point. Jacob comes back, he lives in Egypt, 17 years he lives before he passes away. So the famine is long gone. Joseph's still in charge, though, still a very important man. Do you think that some people thought he might eventually go back to his homeland? I mean, if you're going to go back there, this would be a pretty good opportunity, wouldn't it? And so a couple of things that Joseph does. Number one, he secures the permission of Pharaoh, and that was because, like Gary said, Jacob had his dying request was for Joseph to bury him in the promised land, in the cave of Machpelah. And so Joseph relays that message, and he also makes a promise. He says, as soon as I'm done, I'm coming back. And I think Pharaoh had learned, over the years, when Joseph told you something, you could bank on it. You could rely upon it. So Pharaoh's attitude here, question number 5. How does he respond to Joseph's request? Yeah, basically he says, of course, not only can you go, I'm going to send a lot of people with you to help you. And anything you need is basically going to be at your disposal. So he did, if you read, of course, in the first part of the chapter, he did command the Egyptians to observe an official mourning period for Jacob. That was something, not everybody got that. That was reserved for very important people. And so if you had a very important person who died in Egypt, you would have these days of mourning that were observed through that. 40 days of embalming, you'll read about in the first part of that. Then how many days of mourning? 70 days. I mean, that's 110 days. So we're not talking about a short period of time. And a journey back to Canaan, I mean, you're talking about at least 2 weeks, probably more like 3 to 4. So there's another month that's gone. There's a week that's spent there observing that too. So, you put all those numbers together, you're talking about like 150 days. That's almost 5 months that is devoted to revolving around Jacob's death here. But that shows you a little bit what Pharaoh thought about Joseph. And again, I think how much respect Joseph had for his father, Jacob. Question number 6 here. So where does Joseph go and who goes with him? He goes back to Canaan. Who goes along with him?
Joseph's household, his brother's household, his father's household, the little ones in the flock stay behind.
Yeah. Basically, the entire family of Jacob goes, right? The only people who stayed behind were the small children, obviously the women who had to take care of them, and then, of course, they didn't take any of their animals along with them either. But, you think about that. Why did the entire family go? You think there were some people there who it was inconvenient for them to go? Like we said, they weren't gone like just one day, right? Think some people went who it might have been difficult to make that long a journey? Yeah. All the important people, right, of Egypt too go along with them. And Pharaoh sends chariots, he sends horses. There's a tremendous amount of people that accompany him to this, basically the burying of his father. But again, stop and think about that question. Why so many people go? Why don't they just stay home?
They have great respect for Joseph and possibly for his father also.
Yeah. There is a tremendous amount of respect, I think, for Jacob and, like you said, for Joseph too. And, I was kind of thinking about that in our modern day world. That's, I think, one of the things that's sometimes lacking in our world is respect for those people who have gone on from this life and for what they did for us. Kind of interesting, the other day I was reading about this. I don't know if you've ever read it again or heard about it, but they're getting to a point now, and this is supposed to be popular, I think, Georgia was one of the southern states, Tennessee, California, some other northern states that were in this article that were pretty popular, or this thing was becoming pretty popular, but it's called the drive-through funeral. You ever heard of that before? And basically it's set up where you don't have to get out of your vehicle. They've got a place, some of them do, where you can actually drive by and see the body, view the person. They got a book you can sign, and you just drive through the line, you pay your respects, and you sign the book, and you drive off. But, I guess that's one way of doing it. But when you read about Jacob, there was a tremendous amount of respect that was shown for him, for these people, take off all that time to journey this far, just to see his dying wish fulfilled, just to see his body buried in the place that he wanted it buried. So Kind of a little bit different from our modern day society, though, isn't it? For better or for worse. Question number 7 here. What did Joseph do whenever he reached Atad? Yeah. The morning, procession wasn't over with. Even when they got to the place where they were going, they spent 7 days. They spent an entire week. Again, mourning the death of Jacob. And this place was a place, Joseph chose the place. It was actually a threshing floor, the Bible tells us. What do you know about a threshing floor? It's usually located in a pretty high place. Why is that? Need wind, right? The threshing floor. Threshing floor was a place where you separated the seed of the grain from the chaff. And so remember, they would, they'd have animals either pulling, large rocks around in a circle that ground the grain, and then they'd pick it up with like shovels and throw it up in the air, and the wind would carry the chaff off, everything that was useless, and then the good part remained. And so you needed a place that caught some wind in order to accomplish what you wanted. So usually it was up in a pretty high place, pretty open, pretty flat, and it's a place that you could accommodate a pretty large group of people. I think that's part of the reason why Joseph chose it. But by choosing that too, the people of the land started to take notice, didn't they? They took notice of this great caravan and about these events that were going on here. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. Question number 8. So what did the Canaanites who saw Joseph think? All these people, 7 days of mourning up here.
I think they thought it was an Egyptian burial of some sort.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's going back to this idea. They thought, this guy, whoever he was, who died, must have meant a lot to the Egyptians, just because of the size of the people and the importance of the people. Like Steve pointed out, the elders of Egypt were there, chariots, horses, a tremendous crowd. 7 days you spend up there, so it became so intense that they actually kind of renamed the place to symbolize the idea of mourning, or Egyptian mourning. And so it made an impression on those people too. But think about how far this little family of Abraham has progressed. We're to the point now, and it has to do with this promise that God made to Abraham. God made this promise to him. He was going to bless him. He was going to make his name great. And all of Egypt now stops and pays attention to the passing of his grandson. And the attention that's paid to one's life, what is that often considered?
Accomplishments that they had while they were living.
Yeah, I think to most of us, it's an indication of, the greatness or the significance of the life that person lived. One thing I do know, if you turn over to 2 Chronicles 21 and read about Jehoram. He was he was a king in Judah that was, by most people's estimation, a pretty lousy king. But I want you to compare what happened during his life, or what happened at his death, versus what's happening here with Abraham. I'll get it right here in a minute. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Jacob's death. If you look at verse 20, though, in 2 Chronicles 21, it says, he was 32 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 8 years, and to no one's sorrow departed. Was anybody sad to see him go? No. Didn't care one bit. That was the type of legacy he left behind. But you compare that to Jacob, was anybody sad to see him go? Man, tons of people. And so he had made a significant mark on the world in which he lived. All right, let's talk a little bit about his burial. Question number 9 here. So what does Joseph do whenever they get here at Machpelah? Yeah, buries him in the cave. And what's the significance of this particular cave? Yeah, it's where all his forefathers were buried. If you remember, Abraham purchases this cave or this piece of land whenever Sarah dies. So he had a place to bury her. Remember when Abraham goes into the promised land, he doesn't own any land, does he? And so he doesn't even have a piece of land where he can bury his wife. And so he has to buy this piece of land just so he can bury his wife. He buried her there. That's where Isaac and Ishmael bury Abraham. That's where Jacob and Esau bury Isaac. And now that's where Joseph and his brothers bury Jacob. And so it's a pretty significant place because it's a place that these people look to in the future, anticipating one day all this is going to be ours. That's why we want to be buried here. You know, it's all going to belong to us one day. But Joseph did what his father requested him to do. Now, there's kind of another problem. Go ahead.
I think you're going to where I want to go.
Okay. I don't know if that's right, but I'm going to shift gears. So if you want to stay here, you might want to stay here. No? Okay. There's a shift in the narrative here after they've gone through basically 5 months of solid mourning and thinking about the death of their father and taking care of everything. Everything kind of settles down, and you get back to a sense of normalcy here. And what are Joseph's brothers thinking about? They're starting to, some bad thoughts are starting to run around inside of their head. And like we mentioned, Jacob lived 17 years in Egypt. So it's been 17 years since Joseph has confronted them about what they've done to him and basically said, I forgive you. Do you think that's something they talked about a lot after that?
Yes.
You think so?
Yes, I think so.
Well,
If you had all that going on, and you had that many siblings, I mean, even with one sibling, sometimes it's hard to figure it out. And having that many and them having to be notorious,
yeah.
land, they had a reputation. Yeah, I think there was probably some consideration.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. If I were them, I wouldn't bring it up to Joseph again, would you?
Amongst ourselves, I think they
Yeah, they might have talked about it behind closed doors, but I doubt they had many face-to-face conversations with Joseph about it. I think probably when they were around him, they just kind of pretended like it didn't happen. But we're 17 years later now.
I get the idea that they thought maybe their father, now that father's gone, there's nothing to keep Joseph from doing whatever to him,
Yeah.
making them slaves or whatever.
Yeah, they thought their father was the reason that Joseph was so kind and forgiving to them, right? And like Daryl said, the way that they viewed him was he was kind of this protective or restraining force, that was in place as long as he was there. But now that protective and restraining force is gone, and so now their thoughts are, well, Joseph's finally going to get even. He was just holding back because he didn't want Dad to see what he's going to do to us. And now Dad's gone, and he can do whatever he wants. And, he was the second most powerful man in Egypt. Is there a reason to be afraid? He could do whatever he wanted to do to you.
That gives you a kind of idea of their mentality, how they think, because in great places, they probably would get him.
Yeah. Yeah, they were.
Joseph was different kind.
Yeah, a lot of these fellows we read about weren't really the most kind and forgiving people that you could come across in this world, right? So, but those 11 brothers began to think that Joseph might want to seek vengeance against them now, get even with them, and so all kinds of questions begin to flood their minds, and you couple that with the fear that they had, this guy's, he can do whatever he wants to do with us. All that pressure got the best of them. and to the point that they couldn't stand it any longer, and they felt like they had to act. You know, they had to do something. So what they do?
That's another lie. So pretty much told another lie.
Yeah, as far as we know, right? Go ahead.
They fulfilled the dream.
Okay. And that happens several times, doesn't it, throughout the book of Genesis. But they basically, you know, you read about what they did here. They basically sent a messenger, and what that messenger claimed.
Father has commanded to forgive them.
Yeah. They said, listen, before Dad died, he told us to tell you that he wanted you to forgive us. Well, he didn't ask, he commanded, right? You think that was true? I doubt it. Again, I think this is just paranoia that they brought on themselves, because I don't think there's been anything from Joseph to indicate that, you know, he's going to do something to them or try to get even with them. They had a hard time. They had a hard time understanding forgiveness.
Don't you think if Jacob really wanted that, he would have told Joseph himself.
Right.
Telling the brothers.
Yeah.
To tell Joseph.
Yeah, he wouldn't have told his brothers to tell him after he died to make sure, you know, that Joseph knew this. But like you said, he spent enough time with Joseph and told him the things that he wanted. He would have mentioned that too. So question number 11 here, how does Joseph respond to his brothers?
Fear not.
Well, yeah, and you know, that was something that Joseph took personal too, right?
Yeah, that was saying.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
He said, don't worry about that, I'm in a place with God, I'm not going to do that. But little did you know, as evil as you guys have been doing, this is all planned to save tons of people. So what you did was, even though it was wrong, it was right.
Well, yeah, even though it was wrong, God accomplished a lot of good out of it, didn't he? And we talked about that whenever it happened a little bit. You know, that's what we've got to try to find the difficult things in life. It's easy to point and say, well, this is a bad thing, it happened to me. Well, what good can you get out of it? You know, can you make some good come out of a bad situation? And there's a lot of times you can't. But you have to be looking, don't you? And you have to be willing. And again, I think it's easy for us to read this story and say, what's wrong with these guys? You know, what's the big problem? But I think it's hard for us as humans to believe in total forgiveness, don't you? Do you agree with that or disagree? Total forgiveness. Divine forgiveness. Do we struggle with it as Christians? Yeah. I mean, how many times have you looked at your life and maybe thought, I just don't know if I'm forgiven or not. I don't know if God could forgive me for something like that. But the Bible teaches us, you know, and that's one of the reassuring things when we study God's Word. God has forgiven us completely, totally, and He's adopted us as His children. That's how much He's forgiven us. And so I think we have what we need to do in those times when our human nature finds it hard to believe in complete and total forgiveness is to open up the Bible and read it. Because there's some tremendous passages along the lines of forgiveness. I was thinking about a couple of them that come to my mind. One of my favorite, I've said it before, but Hebrews 8 and verse 12, their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. I mean, that's how much God forgives us. Is He going to bring it up again? Does He think about it behind the scenes? It's done, it's over with, it's gone, been forgiven. There's a passage in Psalm 103, as far as the east is from the west. That's how far God's removed our transgressions from us. How far is the east from the west? It's as far as you can get, totally opposite, right? That's how much God thinks about our sins and our transgressions that have been forgiven.
That's why we have to have such an acceptable conscience.
Yeah, but it's hard, isn't it? I mean, it's hard as a human being. And I think it's especially hard between human beings, because it's hard to believe if you tried to kill somebody and then sold them on the black market, and they were in slavery for 20 years, and they come back and say, "I forgive you." Would you totally believe that? We'd probably think, how can you completely just forget about something like that, right? That's not easy to do. But that's what Joseph did. He put it all behind him, put it all in the past, pretended like it never happened between them. And that's true forgiveness. That's divine forgiveness. But I think it's hard for us as human beings to accept that. Anybody else? Go ahead.
That makes me think, and I just looked it up here. The last few verses of Romans chapter 7,
Yeah.
Paul talks about, and Paul, the great apostle, he talks about how wretched a man he feels he is because he can't he wants to do good, but he does bad. He can't control all his behavior. He's a wretched man. And that's Paul's view.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. It's just hard.
He said, thank God for Jesus Christ our Lord.
Yeah.
It's his salvation.
Yeah. And it's just hard as a human to comprehend that. We look at our lives and we think about all the bad things we ever did, and how can God forgive us of everything? How can He never think about any of those things again? But it goes back to one of those things. It's why He's God and we're not, right? 12, we kind of talked a little bit about that. What does Joseph do? 13 here, when he was about to die. Yeah, calls everybody in, makes some promise that he would bring his bones with him out of Egypt. I think the whole time I've talked about Genesis, I've confused Joseph's bones with Jacob's bones. Joseph was the one who told them to carry his bones out of Israel, or out of Egypt. I'll get it right here in a minute. Whenever God brought them to the promised land. But the Hebrew writer talks about that in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22. How old was Joseph when he died? 110 years old. Jacob was 147. Isaac was 180. Abraham was 175. So he had a relatively short life compared to those who had gone on before him. What happened to him whenever he died? What did they do? Yeah, he was embalmed and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. What? I don't know. I don't know why. He said just whenever you get out of here, just make sure you take them. So he evidently, and he lived most of his life in Egypt, wasn't like Jacob was. But, the Egyptians, they had this belief that the body needed to be preserved for the afterlife. And they believed the soul kind of wandered around for a point in time, but if you wanted to have a good afterlife, you needed to preserve the body. And so that's why they practiced embalming. But that was their custom. That was their culture. And, of course, when you're in Rome, you do like the Romans do, right? It's kind of interesting. Those are the only two Israelites you ever read about in the Old Testament ever being embalmed. All right, end of chapter 50 in Genesis. Anybody got any thoughts or questions next week? Moving on to the book of Daniel.